October 8, 1943. 6,000 feet above the Netherlands, Flight Officer Ralph Hofer gripped the control stick of his Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, his first combat mission barely 20 minutes old. The farm boy from Salem, Missouri, had never fired his guns in anger before this moment. Yet through the oil-smeared windscreen, he watched a Messerschmitt Bf-109 tear into an American fighter with murderous precision. What happened next would violate every rule his commanders had drilled into him. Break formation. Never pursue alone. Protect your leader at all costs. But something in Ralph Hofer, something forged in Missouri wheat fields and Chicago boxing rings, rejected those calculations entirely. He broke hard left, dove away from his flight, and went hunting. That evening, back at RAF Debden, the gun camera footage from his plane would stun veteran pilots, men who'd flown dozens of missions without ever firing their weapons in anger. A Bf-109 filled the frame at point-blank range, absorbing punishment from 850 caliber machine guns. The German fighter rolled, dove, and disintegrated. On his first combat mission, this farm boy with zero aviation experience before 1941 had done what seemed impossible. He'd scored a kill. But that moment was merely the beginning. Over the next 9 months, Ralph Hofer would destroy 30 German aircraft through tactics so reckless, so undisciplined, so successful that his commanders debated daily whether to ground him or promote him. His brand of aerial warfare defied every military doctrine. The boy who joined the Royal Canadian Air Force on a whim would become the 20th highest scoring ace in the 8th Air Force. He'd also become the second highest scoring 8th Air Force pilot killed in action. His story reveals a truth the military establishment rarely acknowledges. Sometimes the greatest warriors succeed not despite breaking every rule, but because they break every rule. June 22, 1921, a farm near Salem, Missouri. Ralph Halbrook entered a world where aviation was a distant fantasy for rural Americans. His father worked in a region where automobiles themselves were still novelties. The boy who'd one day fly the world's most advanced fighter planes grew up without electricity in most farm homes, without indoor plumbing, without any hint that the sky would ever be his domain. When Ralph was 4, his father died. His mother remarried, and the boy took his stepfather's surname, Hofer. The name would eventually appear in combat reports, intelligence debriefs, and memorial services across England. But in 1925, it was simply the name of a Missouri farm boy, learning to work the land, fix machinery, and survive the Great Depression. Athletics saved him from grinding poverty. In 1940, he won a Golden Gloves trophy in the light heavyweight division. He played semi-pro football in Chicago leagues. His reflexes, his willingness to absorb punishment and keep fighting, all honed in rings and fields, not classrooms. The aggression that would later terrify German pilots was forged at Trafton's gym in Chicago, where the family eventually relocated. He even boxed professionally for a time under the name Halbrook, sparring with the legendary Billy Conn. By 1940, Ralph Hofer had abandoned formal education. He enrolled briefly in junior college, showing faint interest in commercial art, but the structured environment suffocated him. He returned to Missouri, taking a civilian job at Fort Leonard Wood. His plans, such as they were, involved heading to California to pursue prize fighting. Aviation never crossed his mind. The transformation from aimless drifter to combat pilot happened entirely by accident. In the fall of 1941, Hofer struck north to Detroit. He'd contracted to deliver a new 1942 Hudson automobile from the factory to a buyer on the West Coast, in exchange for travel expenses. While waiting for the car, he took a day trip across the Detroit River to Windsor, Ontario. An immigration official, assuming the young American had crossed to enlist, directed him to a Royal Canadian Air Force recruiting office. Hofer had never considered flying. He'd never been inside an aircraft. No technical education, no navigation skills, no understanding of aerodynamics or ballistics. But the spontaneous impulsiveness that defined him took over. On July 19, 1941, within hours of crossing the border, he enlisted in the RCAF as an aviation cadet. The Hudson delivery contract was abandoned. California and prize fighting were forgotten. This decision should have ended in disaster. Aviation training in 1941 demanded mathematical precision, technical knowledge, and strict adherence to procedure. Hofer had none of these, yet somehow he completed elementary flight training in Canada. He mastered basic aircraft control. He passed navigation courses despite no natural aptitude for the subject. He absorbed gunnery instruction despite never having fired a weapon in aerial combat. By October 1942, Sergeant Pilot Hofer shipped to Britain. The RCAF posted him to training units, not combat, leaving him watching the war from the sidelines, growing increasingly frustrated. In June 1943, an opportunity emerged. The U.S. Army Air Forces began accepting transfers from Americans serving in the RCAF. With his flight hours and training, Hofer qualified for immediate combat assignment. On June 11, 1943, the transfer changed his status from sergeant pilot to flight officer, a unique rank for non-commissioned pilots. More importantly, it put him on the path to combat. First, though, more training. The USAF required proficiency in the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, a massive fighter weighing 5 tons empty. Powered by an 18-cylinder radial engine producing 2,000 horsepower, the P-47 was unforgiving to careless pilots. Its weight and power demanded respect, precision, skill. Hofer approached it with characteristic disregard for conventional wisdom. September 1943. RAF Station Debden, Essex. Flight Officer Hofer reported to the 334th Fighter Squadron, 4th Fighter Group, 8th Air Force. He couldn't have joined a more legendary unit if he'd designed it himself. The 4th Fighter Group had been formed on September 29, 1942, by merging 3 RAF Eagle squadrons, 71, 121, and 133. Every pilot in those squadrons was an American volunteer, men who'd crossed into Canada to fight before the U.S. entered the war. They brought their own culture, independent, aggressive to the point of recklessness, contemptuous of peacetime discipline. They'd made their reputations in Supermarine Spitfires over France and the Channel. Their transition to American command did nothing to dim their rebellious spirit. The 4th Fighter Group became known as the most individualistic, most aggressive, most successful fighter unit in the 8th Air Force. Into this environment walked Ralph Hofer, bringing his own brand of chaos. With his unruly long brown hair, violating every grooming standard, his bright blue football jersey, number 78 in orange, worn off duty, his gold snake ring on his left hand, he looked more like a college athlete than a military pilot. Around the base, he was often seen with Duke, an Alsatian dog he'd adopted from a pilot who'd bailed out over France. Witnesses said Hofer sometimes took Duke on local flights, crouching low in the seat to make it look like the dog was at the controls when he passed other pilots. He'd even leave his parachute behind to make room for the dog. His appearance was just the surface. Hofer approached military discipline with cheerful disregard. He was picked up by MPs in London for not wearing rank insignia. Then they discovered he had no ID cards. His dress uniform blouse was tailored in zoot suit style, flashy jazz-era fashion, nothing like standard military attire. Everything about him suggested he'd wash out of combat aviation within weeks. Then came October 8, 1943. The 4th Fighter Group scrambled to escort Boeing B-17 Flying Fortresses attacking targets in Bremen, Germany. Hofer flew as wingman to Captain James A. Clark, a veteran Eagle Squadron pilot, in a borrowed P-47C, serial number 416413, marked QPG. His duty was simple: stay in formation, cover his leader. Watch for enemy aircraft, do not engage unless forced, do not break formation. Over the Netherlands, German fighters attacked. Bf-109s dove from above, forcing the American formation to split. Hofer's Thunderbolt flickered and spun down, emerging west of Zala. When he regained control, he was alone at low altitude, separated from his flight, lost over enemy territory on his first mission. The textbook response: climb, orient using landmarks in the sun, head west for England at maximum speed. Hofer ignored the textbook. At low level over the Dutch countryside, he spotted a Bf-109 chasing a P-47. Smoke poured from the American fighter as the German pressed his attack. The P-47 turned right and dove from 1,000 feet, clearly doomed. Hofer reacted on instinct, not training. He closed on the Bf-109 at full throttle. The German pilot, focused entirely on his victim, never saw the threat behind him. At 100 yards, Hofer opened fire. 850 caliber guns converged on the enemy fighter. Strikes and flashes erupted along the fuselage. Oil sprayed back, coating Hofer's windscreen. The Bf-109 rolled over and dove straight down. Hofer had to shove his stick forward violently to avoid ramming it. By the time he pulled out of the dive, oil completely obscured his forward vision. He headed west toward the coast at 300 feet, effectively blind. His adventure wasn't over. A half-mile offshore, a small German patrol vessel opened fire. Hofer, with no clear view and low on ammo, took a few short bursts at it before turning for England. He landed at Debden hours later, one of the last aircraft to return. Ground crew immediately noticed something unusual. The protective tape over his gun muzzles was broken. The new pilot had fired his weapons on his first mission, a rare occurrence. When Hofer reported to his intelligence officer and told his story, veterans crowded to see the gun camera footage, skeptical to the core. New pilots just didn't score kills on their first mission. The numbers were clear. Most flew dozens of sorties before they even got a clear look at an enemy plane, let alone fired at one. The film rolled. There on the screen, filling the frame at close range, was a Bf-109 absorbing devastating fire. Strikes walked up the fuselage. The canopy shattered. Pieces flew off the airframe. The aircraft rolled inverted and dove out of frame. The impossible had happened. The farm boy from Missouri had scored on his first combat mission by breaking every rule he'd been taught. Over the next 4 months, Hofer flew regular missions without scoring additional victories. On February 6, 1944, he brought down another Bf-109 over France. Then his score began to climb with terrifying speed. Between his second victory and the end of May 1944, Hofer would destroy 28 more German aircraft. His tactics evolved in a direction that horrified his commanders while producing undeniable results. March 18, 1944, the 4th Fighter Group escorted bombers attacking Munich. The unit had just traded its P-47s for North American P-51 Mustangs, sleek, long-range fighters that would become the war's most iconic American warplane. Hofer was assigned to fly No. 4 position in White Flight, 34th Squadron, wingman to the wingman, the most junior spot in a 4-ship element. His job, stay in formation. Do not engage independently. Over Bavaria, Hofer spotted a Bf-109 below the formation. Without a radio call, without warning his leader, he split from White Flight and dove. The Bf-109 never knew what hit it. 50 caliber rounds tore through its fuselage. The German fighter crashed in a ball of fire. Hofer pulled up looking for his flight. They were gone, far ahead, unaware they'd lost their No. 4. While climbing to rejoin, he spotted another Bf-109. He gave chase. The German pilot glimpsed the P-51 close behind and bailed out immediately, rather than fight. Hofer was now completely alone, deep in German airspace, with a malfunctioning radio that cut him off from friendly forces. The sensible move: set course for England at once. Instead, Hofer went looking for more targets. He spotted a German airfield and cruised the area, hunting. He chased a third Bf-109 into clouds and lost it. Disappointed but undeterred, he headed for Munich, hoping to find his flight. On the way, he spotted 2 more Bf-109s passing above and in front. Any tactical manual would scream to avoid engagement. 2 enemy fighters versus 1 American. Deep in enemy territory, low on fuel, radio dead. The odds were suicide. Hofer climbed after them at full throttle. As he did, his Mustang's propeller pitch control malfunctioned. The blades suddenly lost their ability to bite the air. The engine screamed. Boost and RPM spiked to dangerous levels. The Mustang shuddered violently, losing speed as the propeller windmilled uselessly. For the first time that mission, survival finally crossed Hofer's mind. The Swiss border was close. Switzerland stayed neutral, interning any Allied or German aircrew who crossed into its airspace. Internment meant he'd live, but it also meant his war was over. Hofer put the Mustang into a shallow glide toward Switzerland. Once over Swiss territory, he started bailout procedure, jettisoned the canopy, prepared to exit. At that moment, the propeller pitch control inexplicably corrected itself. The blades bit air again. The engine smoothed. Flying speed returned. Hofer found himself in an open cockpit P-51 with the Swiss Alps below. His aircraft suddenly airworthy again. He calculated his remaining fuel. With luck, he might reach England. He averaged his consumption against distance and decided to try. The canopyless P-51 flew north and west across German airspace at maximum cruise speed. Wind roared through the open cockpit. Cold at altitude bit through his flight suit. Hours passed. The English Channel appeared. The white cliffs of Dover materialized. Kent spread below. He landed at Manston, an emergency field on the Kentish coast for damaged aircraft. When ground crew checked his fuel tanks, they found 6 gallons remaining. 6 gallons in a P-51 that burned 50 gallons per hour at cruise power. He'd flown home on fumes, canopyless, after destroying 2 enemy fighters alone deep in Germany. The mission made Hofer an ace, 5 confirmed victories. He was still a flight officer, one of the lowest-ranking members of the 4th Fighter Group's air echelon. His commanders faced an impossible dilemma. His complete disregard for formation discipline endangered other pilots. But he kept coming back with kills. Gun camera footage proved every claim. Intelligence officers couldn't dispute the results. Through the spring of 1944, Hofer's score climbed. By the end of March, he'd added a Focke-Wulf FW-190 to his victories. In April, 5 more enemy aircraft fell to his guns. On April 22, 1944, he was promoted to second lieutenant. The promotion changed nothing about his behavior. Then came the last 10 days of May 1944. A period of aerial combat so intense, so successful, it defied comprehension. Hofer claimed 14 German aircraft destroyed, 10 in aerial combat, 4 on the ground during strafing runs. 14 kills in 10 days, a rate that exceeded many pilots' entire combat tours. On May 23, 1944, he was promoted again to first lieutenant. On May 24th, he shot down 2 FW-190s in aerial combat. On May 29th, he destroyed 5 Heinkel. He 177 bombers on the ground during a strafing run. 4 confirmed, 1 shared with another pilot. These ground victories came from attacks on heavily defended German airfields, where anti-aircraft fire routinely shot down American fighters. Hofer pressed his attacks at minimum altitude, guns blazing, pulling up through flak bursts that shredded other aircraft. On June 2, 1944, Hofer was named flight commander of a flight in the 334th Squadron. He now held responsibility for leading other pilots. The most undisciplined pilot in the group was supposed to maintain formation, coordinate tactics, and protect his wingmen. He developed a reputation for radio indiscipline that matched his tactical recklessness. Where other pilots used brief tactical calls or maintained silence, Hofer filled the frequency with offhand comments. His most famous quip came during a mission over the Alps. While other pilots hunched over maps and scanned for threats, Hofer keyed his mic and said, "Gee, ain't the Alps pretty?" June 6, 1944, D-Day. Allied forces stormed the Normandy beaches in the largest amphibious invasion in history. The 4th Fighter Group flew multiple sorties over the invasion area, protecting bombers and strafing German positions. On his second sortie that evening, Hofer's blue flight from the 334th Squadron caught a German road convoy in Normandy and began strafing runs. They never saw the Luftwaffe fighters above them. A large force of Bf-109s dove on blue flight while the Americans were focused on ground targets. 3 of the 4 P-51s were shot down in seconds. Only Hofer escaped. He broke hard, dove for the deck, and vanished into the growing darkness. Once again, his squadron lost pilots while their most undisciplined member survived. 5 days later, on June 11, 1944, small arms fire hit his P-51 over France. The aircraft became unflyable. Hofer made an emergency landing at a temporary Allied airstrip in the invasion beachhead. He walked away uninjured. Later that day, he flew another aircraft back.